Hello everybody, I'm carrying on with chapter 4. I hurried on, swallowing my fear as best I could. I thought of the gibbons I had seen back in the zoo and tried to persuade myself how harmless they had looked. They'd leave us alone. They'd never attack us. They weren't man-eaters. But as the rustling came ever closer, ever more threatening, I found it harder and harder to convince myself. I began to run. I kept running until the track brought us out on the rocks into the blessed light of the day. And there it was, the sea again. This end of the island appeared to be littered with massive boulders that lay like tumbled cliffs all along the coast. We leapt from one to the other, and all the while I kept a keen eye out for the trickle of the stream coming down through the rocks from the forest above. But I found none. I was exhausted by now. I sat down to rest, my mouth dry, my head throbbing. I was racked with desperate thought. I would die of thirst. I would be torn limb from limb by the monkeys. Stella's eyes looked into mine. "There's got to be water," I told her. "There's got to be." "So," said her eyes, "what are you going to do? Sitting here feeling sorry for yourself?" I forced myself to my feet and went on. The sea water in the rock pool was so cool, so tempting. I tasted it, but it was salty and brackish. I spat it out at once. You went mad if you drank it. I knew that much. The sun was already low in the sky by the time we reached the beach on the other side of the island. You were only about halfway round by my reckoning. This place was so much bigger than it seemed from high up on the hill this morning. Despite all my searching, I had found no water, nothing to eat. I could go no further, and neither could Stella. She lay stretched out beside me on the sand, panting her little heart out. We would have to stay here where we were for the night. I thought of going into the forest a little way to sleep on ground under the trees. I could make a nest of soft dead leaves. The jungle floor was thick with them. But I dared not venture in, not with the shadows of night falling fast over the island. The howling had started up again far away in the forest. A last maleficent even song, a chanting that went on and on until darkness covered the island. Insects, that I presumed they are anyway, whirled and whined from the forest. There was hollow tapping like a frantic woodpecker. There was scraping, scratching and grunting, grating noise that sounded like frogs. The whole orchestra of the jungle was tuning in. But it wasn't the sound that frightened me. It was those phantom eyes. I wanted to be as far as possible from those eyes. I found a small cave at one end of the beach with the dry, sandy floor. I lay down and tried to sleep, but Stella would not let me. She whined at me in pain and of her hunger and thirst. So I slept, only fitfully. The jungle droned and cackled and croaked all night long, and mosquitoes rapped me too. They whined in my ears and drove me mad. I held my hand over my ears to shut out the sound of them. I curled myself around Stella, trying to forget where I was, to lose myself in my dreams. I remembered then that it was my birthday, and thoughts of my last birthday back at home with Eddie and Matt and the barbecue we'd had in the garden. How the sausages smelled so good. I slept all night. The next morning I woke cold and hungry and shivering, and I was bitten all over. It took me some moments to remember where I was and all had happened to me. I was suddenly overwhelmed by one cruel reality after another. My utter loneliness, my separation from my mother and my father, and all the dangers around me. I cried aloud in my misery until I saw that Stella was gone. I ran out of the cave. She was nowhere to be seen. I called for her. I listened for her, but only the gibbons howled in reply. Then I turned and saw her. She was on the rocks high above my cave, half hidden from me, but even so I could see her head. But even though I could see her, her head was down. She was clearly intent on something. I clambered up to find out what it was. I heard her drinking before I got there, lapping rhythmically, noisily, as she always did. She did not even look at me as I approached. That was when I saw that she was drinking from a bowl, a battered tin bowl. Then I noticed something strange upon the flat shelf of rock above her. I left Stella to her water feast and climbed up further to investigate. Another bowl of water, and beside it palm trees laid out on the rocks and half covered by an upturned tin. I sat down and drank the water without a pause for breath. Water had never tasted so wonderful. Still gasping, I lifted inside the tin. Fish, thin strips of fluorescent white fish, dozens of them, laid out neatly in rows on the palm tree. And 5, 6, no 7 small red bananas. Red bananas! I ate the fish first, savouring each precious strip. But even as I ate, I was looking around me, looking for a telltale trembling of leaves at the edge of the forest, or for a trail of footprints in the sand. But I could see no one. Yet someone had brought this to me. Someone must be there. Someone must be watching me. I wasn't sure whether to be fearful or overjoyed. Stella interrupted my thoughts. She was whimpering pitifully. I knew it wasn't love or comfort she was after. She caught every strip of fish I threw her, snaffling it in her one gulp, and waited for the next. After that, it was one for me, one for her. Her bescreeching eyes would not let me do otherwise. The fish was raw, but I didn't mind. I was too hungry to mind, and so was Stella. I kept the red bananas for myself. I ate every single one of them. They weren't at all like bananas back home, and much sweeter altogether, much juicier, much more delicious. I could have eaten a dozen more. Once I had finished, I stood up and scanned the forest. My benefactor, whoever he or she was, had to be somewhere close by. I was sure I had nothing to fear. I had to make some kind of contact. I put my hands to my mouth and called out again and again, "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" My words echoed around the island. Suddenly the forest was alive again, and the noise, the great cacophony of singing and hooting and howling and calling and croaking. Stella barked wildly at it. As for me, I felt suddenly exhilarated, elated, ecstatically happy. I jumped up and down, laughing and laughing until my laughter turned to tears of joy. I was not alone in this island. Whoever was here must be friendly. Why else would they have fed us? But why would they not show themselves? They would have to come back for the bowls, I thought. I would leave a message. I found a sharp stone, knelt down and scraped out my message on the rock beside the bowl. Thank you. My name is Michael. I fell off a boat. Who are you? After that, I determined to remain on the beach all that day and stay close to my cave and my rocks. I would keep it always in sight, so I would at least be able to see who it was that helped me. Stella ran on ahead of me down into the sea, barking at me, inviting me to join her. I didn't need any persuading. I plunged and cavorted and whooped and splashed, but through all these antics, she just cruised steadily on. She always looked so serious when she swam, chin up, paddling purposefully. The sea was balmy and calm, barely a ripple of wave to be seen. I didn't dare go out of my depth. I had quite enough of that for a lifetime. I came out clean and refreshed and invigorated, a new person. The sea was a great healer. My bites were still there, but they did not burn any more.